When I reflect on my early years, sometimes smiling through my tears, joyous memories embrace my heart. With adoration, I thank my God. He gave me life, set me free to trod my path responsibly. Wrapped in his love, I feel his care, never doubting his being there. Thank you, dear God, for Mom and Dad, who geared my life to be prepared for meeting challenges along the way, with head uplifted day by day. My siblings were a blessing too, always there to see me through. Their enduring love made me strong, like the lyrics of a favorite song. Precious years have come and gone, wondrous memories linger on. When I waken unto tomorrow, they remain a glowing
It's
aroma.
like the dust that hides the glow of a rose.
I was born in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Denver, Colorado. But I only stayed there 2.5 years, and I was raised up in Arkansas, Ingalls, Arkansas.
New York City.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Born in 1912, November 29th. Louisiana, a little town called Mound.
I grew up in Harlem. Wonderful place to grow up then. My mother was fortunate enough to get a place, the first projects ever built in the United States. They were called the Harlem River Projects in Harlem, and they were the first public housing pretty much basically. At the time they were brick. They still are because I've seen them. And they were built so well, they never fell apart like the other projects that they built after anyway. Grew up in Harlem, New York City.
I lived in the country, about 15 miles from the city, and of which I have written a book about growing up in Mount Olive. That was the area where I was until I was 19 years old. My grandfather, when I grew up to know him, a teenage girl, he talked more about slavery because he was 12 years old at the end of slavery. The lady of the house, the mistress, taught him secretly to read.
When I was up to 12, we were working on a plantation. But then my father and his brother bought 40 acres of land in a little town called Gould, Arkansas. And there was nothing but just woods, you know. So we had to go out there and we cleaned up a spot big enough to build a house and a garden and a lot for the mules and a barn. And so we started raising chickens and ducks and turkeys and guineas. We started raising some corn and cotton and sweet potatoes and peanuts and ribbon cane and sorghum cane and vegetables, all kind of vegetables, and string beans, mustard greens, collard green, cabbage, green beans. So we had cows and hogs and sheep and goats. We had a little of everything. We had a wagon and a buggy. The buggy was like you had a Cadillac car. You have a horse pulling the buggy, and a wagon you had mules pulling it. Well, honey, the first car we saw, they made the announcement that this car was gonna come down and everybody could see it. Got a car running, and no horse or nothing that's pulling it. It's running on its own power. That this car gonna be running on its own power. You're gonna have gasoline. You're gonna be running off of gasoline. When the first airplane come along, said this airplane gonna come along and it's gonna be flying. And I said, well, I said, it's gonna be flapping its wings. I said, no, it's gonna have wings, but they're not gonna flap them. It's gonna be powered, by a motor. So this plane come along, woo, 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 woo. You could hear it along with. It had a long trail of white smoke coming out behind it. So this plane come by and we was all there watching it, and a lot of people was getting around behind the tree, keeping the tree between them and the plane, so it having to fall. It wasn't right there. And man, did you see that plane? Oh yeah, I saw it. It was flying. Yeah, it was flying. So, but it wasn't flapping no wings, but it was flying though. Cause we were looking for it to be flapping. See, that plane was flying and wasn't flapping no wings. It was just flying.
They weren't that the black kids and the white kids. The distinction was not as great as a lot of people assume. In the housing project in which we grew up, white families lived there as well, and black families. Now there was kind of a line where one section where the white kids lived and another section where the black kids lived. But the irony of that is that we all went to the same school, and the school, I'm talking about elementary school at this point. The school was like right in the middle, and so we were friends, and so our attitudes about race were radically different from what happened subsequent to that. We would buy at the same markets, we would go to the same movies, we would hang out. Ice skating is what we did. We didn't roller skate, or we didn't have skateboards, and we'd go bike riding together and things like that. So, and we didn't have derogatory names that we referred to each other, at least from my experience. So and so was your, who is so and so? He's my friend, or she's my friend. Not necessarily my white friend or my Jewish friend. To a college life, my brother and I were fortunate enough to go to the University of Connecticut, and we belonged to a quote-unquote integrated fraternity. And we had white roommates, and our social activities which took place there at the fraternity house, parties and everything, wide open, So I got to know a lot of blacks who had grown up in the South. They grew up disadvantaged to the extent that they didn't have access to public facilities and things like that. We did, and so that was a very real experience for them, and they didn't deny the extent to which that affected their worldview, and any more than they did ours. That ours sounded interesting and foreign to them, as well as vice versa. So growing up in different parts of the country, even at the same time, meant a different life experience.
I went to a technical high school where I was one of about 3, 4, or 5 black guys. I mean, a couple of the teachers were very disrespectful and didn't think I should be in the school. It was a high academic technical high school. The students, of course, were pretty racist, a lot of them. But hey, you survived that. I was there for the knowledge. Some couple of high school teachers tearing up my work, that I spent a lot of time on. Mechanical drawing class, and one of the instructors tore it up in front of the class, claimed it was inadequate. He did it on spite. But hey, that's something you live with, As a black kid then, in that environment, I could have expected that. It never deterred me. Now, of course, it bothered me and stuff. When I was in the military, a lot of times, you got racial remarks and things like that. I was in the Air Force. I was in radar maintenance. I was in, I like to brag, the first computerized radar system the Air Force ever had. The computers were underground, 7 to 8 feet high, tubes. You know what a vacuum tube is? Do you know what a vacuum tube is? You know what a transistor is? Well, vacuum tube was before transistors. They're pretty ancient. They were what was used in radios way back then and all. And so you had all these vacuum tubes and huge banks, 3 stories deep. And you know how much memory that those computers had? Maybe 5K. Maybe 5K. I decided to move around the country and see what it was like. And I ended up in Pasadena, 50 cents in my pocket.
What year?
63.
Civil rights. When we were at Lincoln, I looked. We were some of the early people in the sit-ins in the 1947, 48, 49. Lincoln University is in Pennsylvania, Chester County, and it's almost on the border with Maryland. And there was a town right on the Mason-Dixon line in Maryland called Oxford, Pennsylvania. You had to sit upstairs in the movies. You couldn't eat at the Oxford restaurant, the hotel restaurant. So what we did is we formed a movement so that during your free period from class, we would go down to Oxford and take every other seat in the Oxford coffee house. And it became to a point of almost violence. And they had to bring in the National Guard that sort of formed a cordon so we could get through the angry crowd and go in and take our seats, every other seat in the Oxford restaurant. Well, they put us all and taken to the jail, but immediately released so we could get back to our class. And years later, when we left Lincoln, my class left in 1950, I believe in the year 1951 or 52, the grand jury of the state of Pennsylvania found that Oxford was wrong in segregating us, and they did something to eliminate that. So that was some of the early sit-ins that I remember. You were angry, and they taught us to do peaceful demonstrations. Even in Pasadena, when I moved here, they were trying to break down the closed housing, and because there was restricted covenant housing here. And we were angry, and I remember whenever we would go on a march, they'll throw things at you, spit at you, and you're not to retaliate. And that's the kind of strength we had to have. It was hard to take because, uh, we had gone through the war and come back. And over there in Italy, where I was, we didn't face that kind of racial discrimination. In the towns, we found that people were, they accepted us, they were friendly. And then we come back home and we return to all of this mess. Yeah. It made you angry.
I can't remember any civil rights leader that came to Los Angeles that I didn't go to see. There were all kinds of things happening. LA was a very active place, and there was an effort to integrate housing out in Torrance, and we went out there with with placards and all that sort of thing, trying to get blacks to be able to move in there. I'll never forget this as long as I live. When I was marching, a white woman spit on me. Okay, and I think she just hit, my trousers or part of my shoe or whatnot. And my first reaction was to do something that wouldn't have been cool. I had a psychological reaction. The psychological reaction said, I will never walk in a picket line again. That's what I said, because I'm not going to have this happen to me, And, but other than that, I went to a lot of things at universities. I had an organization that was formed at our house called the Institute for Black Studies, and it was leaning more on the nationalistic side. That is to say, we were convinced that America was not an accommodating place for black people, and that we needed to get out of Dodge.
Oh, I tell you, I was thrilled. I really didn't think I would live to see a black president, but I prayed that I would. I met Dr. King. I had an opportunity. He came to my church to speak, and he was such a great man. After meeting him, I knew that we had plenty of people that were capable of being president. So when the numbers came on and they knew he was president, we screamed and screamed, and I thank God that he let me live to see that. I didn't think I would. I'm so glad.
Well, first of all, I never thought I'd see it in my life. I didn't. I didn't think that the country could do it. So I was really, really pleasantly surprised and happy. And I hate it when a black person tells me they voted for him because he was black. I hate it. It makes me cringe. Just because he's black makes no sense. So I'll tell you the truth. I didn't think he could be president. I didn't think he would get voted, so I was leaning towards Hillary. But then I said, Hillary voted for that Iraq war, and he didn't. And that was the deciding point between those two.
I remember we were so happy, and I was with Kim, my wife, and my mother, and she was 107 years old, and she had a chance to vote for Obama at the time. She was 107, and we have a picture of her with Obama in the background on it, and she's with a champagne glass. But all I remember is that we all kind of celebrated in a quiet way with my mother and Noel's grandmother.
When Obama ran for office, I went absolutely berserk. I was so enthusiastic. I could not. I'm serious. It was even hard to sleep because I'm thinking about, wow, all the stuff we've been talking about all these years, and wanting to see blacks do this and wanting to see blacks. Here's a man who's going to be the man. I set up. I cut articles out of the newspaper, of pictures. I remember the Sentinel headlines and the LA Times headlines, and I put all that stuff in like a scrapbook. Obama came, and like folks from all over town were there. I mean, it was phenomenal. I took tons of pictures, and he spoke, and every other word that came out of his mouth, people cheered. They had their babies out with them. They brought dogs out with them. I mean, it was like a family, like the real LA, from my perspective, came alive that day. Obama touched a nerve in millions of people, that he represented the best that America could be in every sense of the word. I grew during that period. I think LA grew. I think the whole nation grew. And I think the whole world grew as a direct result of his running with integrity, his running with a program, and his tapping the spirit and the soul and vibrance of what this country really could be all about. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'll tell you what happened. When he was running for president, so Obama's running, I said, I don't believe he's going to win. But I'll tell you one thing, he's going to get my vote just for trying. He's going to get my vote, but I believe with the president they got going, I don't believe he's going to make it. And sure enough, he did. But I sure did vote. I said, I'll tell you one thing, he's going to get my vote, but he's not going to get it because I think he's going to win. I said, but I don't think these guys are going to let him win. And when he won, tell the truth, I was surprised, but I was glad he won. But we'd already got a president in the White House, black. But we got a long way to go because we got so much of this other undercountry stuff, Say, for instance, if you and some white people trying for the same job, 9 times out of 10, they'll get the job. And if you own the job and somebody going to have to be fired, 9 times out of 10, you'll be the first one to be fired. That's a good deal going on right now. I just want equal opportunity, that's all. Just giving you this course, you black. No, just make it a plain field. If I get in there, if I can't make it, then I just go study some more, or tell my kids to study some more. I've seen a whole lot of changes from the time I come along as a young man to the time my kids and things come along. It still is some underground stuff, but they still got the same chance to get the jobs that they applied for, and they're not drinking in different fountains, or everybody drinking out the same fountain. Everybody's sitting in the same waiting room. Everybody getting on the train to get the seat that, you know, that they get, that's their seat. But now guess what? I live to see a black president in the United States. I never thought that when I was a young man coming up, but I got to see it, Obama. And not only that, they said, oh, well, we wasn't paying him no attention, and he slipped in. Said, but he gonna be a one-time president. Turn around, come back, he won the second time. So now what you gonna say? He didn't slip in this time, you know he was in. What you gonna say now? You know what I mean?